What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the third person and action RPG tutorial series, we are going to be going over Hitscan interactions part 4 and really just the combination of our interaction systems part 2. Previously in the series we had the ability to overlap with an item such as our sword here, press E to interact with it and it would go into our inventory. Then we could press our equip button, which is X for me, and now I am carrying my sword. And this worked perfectly fine, but we decided that we wanted more than just the overlap system. We also wanted to be able to look at an object or interactable in the world and press a button to interact with it. So, for example, this NPC here, if I look at them, and you can tell I'm looking at them because there is this green line that is being drawn as I look around. This is a debug line that we set up for these episodes so that we can tell where we're looking. So that's from the center of our camera. So there we go, now we're interacting with our NPC. And we want to support both in the series, but the equipment and the items weren't supported with this method previously. So the last few episodes with Hitscan have been making sure that both systems work together, and also making sure that Hitscan itself works as a whole. So we have Hitscan working, but it only works for NPCs right now. So if I pick my dialogue choice and exit out of here, you'll notice I won't be able to do the same thing with a sword or a helmet. So if I look at this helmet and try to interact with it, you'll see that it's not being added to my inventory. The other thing that we're going to be doing is getting rid of the blueprint components that we had in previous episodes, because just recently we set up our C++ components for meshes and things for our items. That way we could access interactions between these items through one function, one component on them in one place. So before, the way our interaction worked is each one of our different item types. So we have just item, which is things like potions and collectibles. Then we had weapons, pretty self-explanatory. But then we had equipment, which is armor and things like that. They all had their own meshes, they all had their own components, so interacting with them properly was a little bit difficult. In the previous episode we fixed that, but we need to make sure that our interaction system works perfectly with that, and to do that we need to remove the blueprint components. So you'll notice the helmet, for example, has two helmets. This is one object with two helmets. We don't want that. But our old blueprint component is still there. And same with the leggings here. And the chest as well. They just happen to be in the exact same spot. So that's something that we're going to be handling. Cleaning up all that old logic and using our new C++ logic so that our interaction system can work perfectly. So before hopping into this episode, if you want to get caught up in this series, you can check out how we've done everything from locking onto our opponents, movement, and attacking. Alternatively, if you don't care about that and you just care about interaction, you can either check out the first overlap interaction episode and go from there, or you can check out the first Hitscan interaction episode in the series and go from there. You don't need to support both in your game, not all games do, but some do, so if you're interested, I have you covered either way. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. This is a code and blueprint tutorial series. The place I want to start is in the blueprints, so if we go to blueprints, objects, items, we can go into base item BP. From here, we want to remove the blueprint components, which is the interaction box and the static mesh. Now, we had covered some of this in the previous episode, but just be aware, you should only have one type of each component. So root component, item mesh, item interaction box. You can see there's a section here in this pop-up window that says source, inherited C++. And all of these should be that because we want these to be inherited from C++. You can have other components in here if you want. You can add them to the blueprint. They don't have to be created in C++. But for these ones, our mesh and our interaction box, we do want that because that's what we're using for our interactions. And we want this to be consistent between all of our different item types. So I'm going to go into my individual items like health potion BP and mana potion BP. These ones are going to follow base item BP, so they look good. But one note, with the renaming we did, it renamed my event to use item _1. This will actually still work because it is just Unreal's way of renaming things so that two events don't have the same name. But I recommend cleaning this up because it is going to be confusing later. So if you just type use item and grab the event, and make sure it doesn't say use item _1. It just says event use item. That way we know that we only have one instance of this event and we're using the right one. Do this for both the health potion BP and mana potion BP if you didn't already. Now these ones are easy, but let's go to a more complicated one such as the weapon. So we can go to base weapon BP. Now in this component list you see that we have our weapon mesh damage collider interaction box, but then we have item mesh weapon damage box and item interaction box. So the problem here is we have two damage boxes. This is the inherited one. This is the one that we made in the blueprint. And then we have two interaction boxes. Again, this is the inherited one, and this is the one we made in the blueprint. We also have two meshes, inherited, made in the blueprint. So I actually can remove all three of these blueprint created items, because in the previous episode, we transferred all the stats from the blueprint components to our code components. So this is perfectly safe to do. The problem is we may have some logic in the graph that relies on them, and that is why I did not remove them in the previous episode. So that's what we're going to be doing right now. I'm going to start with the interaction box. So we want to remove our blueprint interaction box component on our base weapon BP. And if I delete it and compile and save, you'll see again error because something I have in this graph was using it. So I can click on the error to go to it. And specifically, it is in the attach weapon event. So when we attach weapon, this is when we are attaching it to our mesh, which basically means we've equipped it. So at this point, our interaction box collision was disabled. We couldn't interact with it because it was equipped to us. This is still good logic and we want to keep it. I'm going to make sure I'm using my item interaction box from C++ now instead of the blueprint component. And compile and save. Easy enough. Now let's go to the damage collider. This is the one we made in the blueprint. If I delete this one, you see it has bound events in use. So we can say no and search for this event. It's not going to be far down here. On component begin overlap damage collider. So when this collider was overlapping with things, we were trying to see if we could do damage to them, such as the enemy. We can do the same thing with the C++ created box. So if we are clicking on the C++ component and we scroll down in the details panel, we have this on component begin overlap right here. We can press the plus to add it. Alternatively, you can type in on component begin overlap, add it, and you'll see it is using the weapon damage box. But if you have other components that could be using it, you may see them pop up as well, so you'll have to pick the right one. But just to show you, these do the same thing regardless of how you access it. What we want to do is just replace this one with our C++ one. So the only things that are plugged in here are the execution pin, and other actor is being passed into cast to default enemy. So we want to keep that here as well. And simple enough, there we go. So now damage collider should be able to be deleted, and you can see that it was. So we can compile and save. Let's go to where this error leads us because we have another error, and it is in on component begin overlap. So once we collide with the enemy at the very end here, we deal damage to the enemy, we're saying disable the collision of the damage box. This means we don't want to hurt the enemy multiple times. We don't want to damage them multiple times in one attack. This is perfectly fine. Again, good logic, but we can use the weapon damage box as the target instead of the blueprint component that we had previously. Compile and save. Lastly, we have the weapon mesh. This is the blueprint component. Remember, we already have an item mesh in here that we're assigning properly, but weapon mesh can be removed. So if I right click and delete it, or if I just click on it and delete it, compile and save, you'll see I have a few errors on this one, so let's go here. So first one here is on remove weapon. So when we're removing the weapon, we were disabling collision on the weapon mesh. So we can simply drag off of the base weapon BP and search for item mesh. That's the name of it now. We can drag this into target, and I can see I had two reroute nodes down here as well so that we could detach the mesh from the component. We can still do this, just make sure you pass your item mesh into it. Now later in this function, we were hiding the weapon mesh once we removing this weapon and not attaching it. So basically when we unequip the weapon, we were hiding it, which makes sense because we're putting it away. Same deal, make sure we grab our item mesh and pass it in instead. Now if we compile and save, we have two more. So next one is at the end of attach weapon. And we have another one in attach weapon as well here. So attach weapon is pretty self-explanatory. This is when we're going to be setting it as our equipped weapon and we want to display it on our character. So we were setting the character mesh as the parent of this. But the component that we're attaching is our item mesh. So we want to pass the target into that. And then at the end here, when we are setting the visibility of the item mesh to be visible, because now it is attached to our character and we're ready to display it to the user, we need to pass in our item mesh. At this point, we've fully replaced all the blueprint components with our code component for our base item and base weapon BP. And cleaned up the logic a little bit along the way too. So now when we go to our children of base weapon BP, such as axe BP, and if we go to the full blueprint editor and go to the viewport, you can see our axe is here with all the right data. We just don't have duplicates anymore. And we want to make sure we check each of these individually. So let's check dagger BP. Looking good. And let's check the sword BP. Looking good. Now we have to go to base equipment BP. So if we go to equipment and go to base equipment BP, we can come in here. We see that we have our root component, our item mesh, and our item interaction box. These are the C++ inherited components. That means we want to remove the equipment static mesh and the interaction box. So let's go ahead and do it. Interaction box, delete. Compile and save. We get an error. Let's go to it. So collision is being disabled when we're attaching this equipment. This makes sense because this interaction box allows us to interact with it. Say we have a chest plate and it's on our body. We don't want to be able to interact with it at this point. It would just be getting in the way. So we still want to do that. Just make sure you use item interaction box now instead. The other one is equipment static mesh, which we can delete that, compile and save, and we get a few errors on this one as well. So let's go to them. So it's also an attach equipment. And what we're doing here is we're determining the equipment type so that we can attach it properly to the right spot on the character's mesh. We were attaching the target to the parent. The target is going to be our equipment static mesh and the parent is going to be the character's mesh. But you can see now that because we removed the static mesh, this reroute node has nothing plugged into it. So these targets are empty. Move that down to make some space and we can use our item mesh here and plug it into the reroute node. Compile and save. We have another error. Let's go to the target. It's at the very end of the function. We're setting the visibility of the item mesh to be true because at this point the equipment is active and we're using it or wearing it, so we should be able to see it. So item mesh goes into the target here. Compile and save, and it builds. So we're good here. Let's go to all the children. Chest BP. Open the blueprint editor. Our chest piece looks good. Helmet BP. Our helmet now looks good. There's not double. And leg BP. Only one set of boots. So now we can go ahead and try and play, make sure we don't get any other errors, and you see that we do. I'm pretty sure I can guess what these are, but let's go to them. They're both in the animation blueprints. So we have two animation blueprints. We have a regular AnimBP and a root motion AnimBP. We're technically only using the root motion AnimBP right now, but let's go ahead and fix them both. So Assassin AnimBP, and when we come in here, I'm sure we will be getting an error about using the damage collider, as I can see on screen here. So when we were returning to idle or our attack finished, we were re-enabling collision on the damage collider, which makes sense because we disabled it so we couldn't hit the same opponent multiple times with the same collider during one attack. However, base weapon BP doesn't have damage collider anymore. So we want to delete this node, and instead we want to drag off of this cast to base weapon BP and search for item, I think it's called weapon damage box. Here we go. And plug that in, and now the animation blueprint will compile, and we're going to want to do this for our root motion AnimBP as well. Go to this one, and it is the same deal here, I believe, but yep, we can see it, same events and everything. We have our damage collider here, but it is not working because we don't have damage collider anymore. So instead we remove damage collider and we search for weapon damage box. Compile and save. Now at this point we're not done. There is another issue, and that is in our base character BP. So if we go into the third person CPP, blueprints, characters, base character BP, in here specifically within our interaction function we use the components of all these classes. The base item BP happens to already work because we did not have any conflicting components on here, so these ones just work. But the base weapon BP and the base equipment BP now no longer have their proper components, so we need to replace them. So weapon mesh is going to get replaced by item mesh. Bring it into the reroute node, and interaction box is going to be replaced by item interaction box. Don't forget this little reroute node here either. Make sure it's all hooked up properly. And then equipment is the same thing, so we have equipment static mesh, which is just item mesh now. Reroute node, and then interaction box, same deal. We're going to plug it into item interaction box, plug it in, and plug it into the reroute node. And now we can compile and save again. After compiling, I did get the issues with the static mesh and the interaction box on the item, so just make sure to do the same thing here. And you see that there are a few, so let's go to where they're at. You'll notice I have some errors in this function, interact BP2. This is really just a test function we were using to show Hitscan. So I will go ahead and fix it because we haven't addressed this part yet in the series to the point where we can remove this function. But technically, these are the same errors as before. So we just want to grab item mesh and item interaction box. And we're going to plug them into the same spots we were, and same with the equipment too. And interaction box. Same for interact BP2. Got the errors after compiling, so just fix them as well. Okay, so this is fixed for all of Interact, and now we are good to go. So if I am to launch the game at this point and go to campaign, now all of our equipment, weapons, and items look good, and look how we would expect them to. And we can go up to them and overlap with them and interact with them. And whether I'm holding that or not, I should be able to look at something like my helmet, and I should get the prompt. I won't be able to actually equip it yet because we haven't covered that part of the series. Remember that. But I should be able to see add basic helmet. One other thing, minor thing I saw earlier, when we were transferring over the chest BP, we did not change the equipment type to the right thing. So the equipment type was still helmet for our chest. We want to change that to chest. We got the legs working properly. We just missed the chest. So make sure that yours is correct and as expected. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode on improving your interaction logic in your game using C++. If you did, please subscribe and consider joining the Patreon, YouTube membership, or Discord subscriptions to support the channel. If you ran into any problems while following this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There is a link in the description, and I would be happy to help you out. That support is completely free. Anyway, guys, that's all I got. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.